Deck 13 made the Surge and Surge 2, games about hacking off the hands of cybernetic bad guys and using them to build yourself a futuristic back scratcher. So even when we heard they were leaping into a different game, one that's action and slash about a civil uprising to take out an evil ruler who's blasted the land by possibly stealing its life force, I think we all knew that somehow they were going to find a way to put specific body targeting in it. But this time, it's for the creatures of the world of Atlas Fallen. A desert wasteland that you skate across like a 1980s rollerball track, and between hoping you don't fall and sand off your face at 40 miles an hour or slide off into some dark abyss, you head out to chop every crab pincher, scorpion tail, and desert cat's legs off. If I did sponsors, this is when I'd do it. We don't do deals for shavers for your balls. We give away the game that we're reviewing to people, so comment and subscribe. I got exclusive Starfield, Baldur's Gate, Spider-Man, Stalker 2, Mortal Kombat, and other game coverage coming your way. Jumping back into the story proper, you find a talking gauntlet that, luckily enough, wants to go on your adventure with you to take out the major ruler of the land. Combat is a base of attacks with one or two weapons with their own attack combos, like holding the button while on the ground to rise up swinging, or holding it on the way down to slam a huge hammer down Thor style onto someone's dome. And this also depends on which enemy you take out. For example, mixing these different moves works, but you can also aim for larger enemies you fight and body parts, removing their ability to attack with them or to move properly if you take out a limb. Smashing body parts sends the enemies into a fury, however, resulting in an enemy who sometimes pull off new moves. In a weird way, it's like they're building their own momentum bar, something we're going to talk about in a second for you, and it keeps the combat and the loose nature of everything in Atlas Fallen actually working. And that loose style of combat is rewarded through the co-op, which starts right after the first beginning sections where players can adventure, fight, explore, or just search around the world, all in one game. All attacks build your own momentum meter, an energy meter that builds with each hit like a hero's confidence. Now, as the meter goes higher, you do more damage with even normal attacks and can also unlock the power of the gems as you power them up. But conversely, you also get hit for more damage. So there's this constant push and pull of wanting to hit more and do more and cast more. But it also means that if you don't dodge or parry, you can die more. And that does bring up dodge. It's a simple slide or roll out of the way, aiming to be wherever an enemy's weapon isn't going to land. And as you level it up, you can combo it more and more, jumping across larger and larger gaps, and stay, of course, in the air longer when you take out enemies, because using that move doesn't drop you towards the ground. The parry, well, it's different because it's really not a parry. It's a sand skin ability that freezes you momentarily in place. And if the enemy hits you right at the parry point and you've activated it, they gain a level of this sand shock on them. And sooner rather than later, they're going to freeze in place, opening up some attacks for you. Now, the great thing about the move is it stops you from falling or going up or going sideways, really anything. So if a boss has a ground attack and you missed your swing and you know that the timing is going to be perfect for the enemy to hit you the moment you hit the ground, but perhaps the tail isn't in the proper place for you to parry if you do so, you can literally use the parry in the air for a brief second and just let the attack pass harmlessly below you. Combat's dynamic, it's engaging, it's enjoyable, it's all of the buzzwords that you hear on any AAA title, but it's also a bit loose. Animations in context of creatures attacking, or the smaller ones in particular, having this bit finicky kind of identification when it comes to their dodge or parry moments, and if you should or shouldn't be in a particular line of fire when they actually hit, and they hit you anyway. This also extends to you, with a number of your attacks sometimes hitting enemies where you just think to yourself, I actually whiffed that one really bad. As you explore and learn more, you unlock more of the world, you take on those bosses and become a boss of takedowns. You gather more and more of the essence stones and learn the ability to upgrade those, fuse them together, and attach them to different parts of the gauntlet in different patterns. You play it, you sort of have to adjust it, try them out, and see how it works. Also, at the height of your momentum gauge, you can power up one huge move and burn all of the momentum, shattering enemies. To upgrade the item or the armor, you do that at celestial forges left over from the ancients that came before you. Trying out in patterns, though, brings us to platforming. There is a ton in Atlas Fallen, from a single, double, triple dodge jumps across huge bridge gaps to finding just the right ledge to leap onto to find a hidden tunnel with a small treasure chest. There's a tremendous amount of it, and combined with the sand sliding itself that allows for you to move around the game world, just think ice skating but controlling the sand, it can feel a bit more like a flexible Darksiders or a much more mobile Kingdoms of Amalur. But the similarities between this and Forspoken have to be brought up. They cannot be denied. The games have an incredibly fast movement system through a landscape, a talking gauntlet, and a world in trouble with a hero standing up. While I'll talk about it in the voice, sound, and music section, I just feel like it is much easier to listen to the Gauntlet talk in this game and the factual information they give you than it was in Forspoken. While the movement system is probably a little bit more easy to grasp in Forspoken, especially because it's actually sand sliding in Atlas Fallen, which means occasionally you're just going to be going and stop because there's some grass or something nearby that has stopped you. Rock outcroppings hanging just a bit too long to be realistic, but long enough to look awesome in a fantasy world. Towers, ancient sunken libraries up to their Dewey Decimal Systems, and sand flooding in like water. Creatures dawdling about, strutting around like they own the place, just waiting for you to try to see if they actually do. Atlas Fallen has a great overall world, idea, and aesthetic that may not look technically as good as some other titles you see, but I really do love that they went for the desert and said, we're just going to try to nail this. One of the largest problems in this game is just pop-in galore. So basically pop-in is a feature here. It's that bad. It does highlight systems and how they handle pop-in, like Remnant 2, its use of the nanite system. Atlas Fallen's use of, well, just magic show surprise moments for the pop-up means that a bunch of trees and rocks and ruins randomly appear without the surprise. You'd think in a game like this, showing a bunch of desert territory, that very few things would pop in. Nevertheless, pretty much everything does. It looks like a reverse shooting range with all the targets flipping back up and ponging the bullets back at wherever you were. It's honestly some of the worst I've seen in a current gen title, and strangely, it's not even in some kind of understandable, noticeable ring around the character. It's like instead of picking a draw distance to bring in higher resolution assets, this is just a bunch of scrub brush winning the lottery, leaping into the air and yelling, "I'm here!" And the game has a couple options for upscaling, including FSR. I did get some drops in 3 larger boss battles later on in the game, where the effects, particles, explosions, and various ads leapt into the fray with frame rates above 100, then down to 60 or 70 in those massive battles. Depending on the settings, that's going to affect consumers with lower level cards. I also ran into some stuttering in one particular section that didn't replicate itself later anywhere, a massive mountain spot that had some stutters regardless of what was on screen. The city environments probably are hit the hardest, with one city encased in mist and with numerous other locations branching out from it. These problems were noticeably worse running the game in DirectX 12, but presentation's audio as well. Skating around, throwing up sand roosters behind you as you leap over rocks, go down windswept valleys, and deep dive into cavern complexes in search of myths and legends. The sound isn't bad. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good, and it's somewhat varied. But it is terrible when you go into any big location, and in particular the towns. A peasant will be talking about a city street 400 miles away because the voice will stick with you like an earworm wherever you're traveling. Proximity doesn't matter in this game, and I can see that might have been a reason for them to choose it, especially as you're skiing across the landscape, and that can get quite loud. But still, it is absolutely bothersome in some of the open city locations. Musically, the majority of it is in the cutscenes and in the battles, with suitable drum and string-heavy arrangements that are part of generic fantasy 101, with some doing a great job offering a bit of flavor to a location, and others a bit more been there, done that kind of experiences. I wasn't as taken with this soundtrack as I think I expected. It's just a mixture of more tropish fantasy delivery than I think the game probably deserves, but also because the sound effect for the skating across the world is so loud that running music anywhere near it on a master track would just be devastatingly hard to hear or really rough on the ears. Luckily, the voice isn't rough on the ears, but it's not necessarily great. Sometimes the delivery is heartfelt, like a character speaking deep from a moment of fear. Those are great, with some characters also asking for help or telling you some story that sounds suitably energetic. But a lot of Atlas Fallen is delivered more like temporary lines than I was hoping for. Time and space fillers just filled with the vocals that sounded like they were to be recorded at a different time in a better way. And the main lead, while softer spoken than expected, is pretty fine at first. They just never grow into the role, instead just constantly whisper promising their way through the storyline. However, while the Gauntlet's voice isn't amazing, it is, again, a damn sight better and easier to listen to than the Gauntlet in Forspoken. It's a character in this world that's less so an overt, over-the-top character and more about one given information, sort of like a magical but natural nature guide. But are you going to stick around for all that nature? Are you going to stick around for all the combat that brings us to the fun factor? Atlas Fallen has a horrible opener, a stint that just feels so unlike the rest of the game. You're going to be sitting there thinking, what the hell did I just get myself into? Thankfully, I've just warned you about it. Then it goes away, and you're in the starting of the game proper, and I love the beginning sections and a lot of the middle sections, going to battle, learning new moves, augmenting the momentum bar with the gems I wanted to see, and how each one worked, and just going about the experimentation. That was the best part. However, issues just kept coming up, and slowly, as I continued to get farther through the game, they began to weigh very heavily on me. Making 3 templates, for example, for your momentum bar is awesome. It allows for you to adjust and decide if you just want to switch them out. but unfortunately, it locks you out of doing that in battle. So let's say you decided to make 1 or 2 templates for testing and just didn't copy one of them into the third blank template. It's actually easy to be exploring and accidentally on the console and gamepad for you to walk into a battle with 0 gems at all, because just during travel, you have accidentally hit a trigger and a side direction on the digital pad and switched into the blank section. And a battle can start up at any time regardless if you're the one starting it or not. It's fixed by just remaking one of the presets into the second and third presets so there are no empty ones, but that also means that anytime you want to learn or change or adjust, you probably need to go into all 3 of those presets. It really feels cumbersome. Also, because monster design isn't super varied, a lot of times you're just fighting a guy with 1 or 2 more adds. Mouse and keyboard was a little bit easier, but the lock-on system in this is really tenacious. When the game is throwing small enemies at you, they're flying around, usually somewhat close to the ground, or in places where you can get to them easily, it's nice. Without a technically ranged weapon in the game in the manner that you would expect. Later on though, super high flying enemies where the game's gonna focus on them and spin the camera around isn't fun. They also happen to be near rock faces a lot of times, which can end up having you seeing skyrock, like you're inside of one of those I can't believe they just lived rally videos with a car sliding off a mountain. Sadly, the game started to become very tiresome about halfway through and grew more and more the longer I went. It tracks your level due to upgrades and the levels of enemies, and at some point there were entire sections I just really dared not go until I ground away some more upgrades to the armor. Make no mistake, there was a lot of fun to be had in this title, but there was also a frustration, especially as you got into the mid and later game. I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, deep sale, or never touch it again rating system. Atlas Fallen comes in at a slightly lower price, and that helps at a price that gives it some leverage with solo gamers and a bit more excitement, I think, with co-op players. While I experienced issues, and while those seem to stretch out in the later sections, I'm still going to say this is worth getting if you can ignore some issues, like pop in some performance problems and a lower than expected enemy variety, because that is directly contrasted with the excellent combat with its own backbone idol that each player can switch out, which builds a different, unique base to your playing style. Some epic boss battles, and a world that is usually engaging to explore. Atlas Fallen doesn't get everything right, but even with the missteps, the core parts I enjoyed well enough. Just don't leap into this without preparing yourselves for a rough, gritty, sandy-like texture of a title that's not 100% up to snuff. Subscribe, hit the notify bell, gang.
The gauntlet must be stronger to crush this.
A huge wraith lies there. Whoever comes too close falls prey to it. Surely, no one will ever be able to shatter such a creature.
I am a friend. I don't know your history with Arif, but I believe his intentions are good. Please.
If you don't know our history, then stop talking nonsense, outsider.